She wasn't. And,
don't expect anything from anybody. That's what I learned.
Yeah, but at any rate, so I held my ground, and that chessboard's my chessboard. If she wants to make another chessboard somewhere in the house, have at it, my love. Okay. Oh. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. Tonight we have a return visit from good and dear friend Dan Lanzilotta, the mindful chef. Dan, of course, as you know from previous visits to Progressive Soup, is quite the character. A lot to do with, I have to keep track of the time, a lot to do with food and cuisine, not just hot cuisine, but also regular food, peasant food, stuff that most people actually, it fits into their food budget. But Dan, introduce yourself. Tell me again who you are, where you came from, and what brought you to this point in time.
Chef Daniel Lanzilotta, the Mindful Chef. I'm not using the Mindful Chef as much as I used to.
Okay.
And in fact, I'm not using the word chef that much anymore.
And why is that?
I decided to take it from the front of the name to the end of my name, Daniel Lanzilotta, Chef. The reason why that is because the competition in the chef world is so high. Everybody is a chef now. So
has the word been dumbed down or diluted down?
No, it's everybody wants to be in the food business because we don't produce anything in America anymore. So food is essentially just one of the last things that are still left in America, and so the manufacturing jobs are gone.
Yep.
All kinds of things are gone. The services are offshored somewhere in India or Ireland or China, perhaps.
Yep.
And so the thing that's really left are food concepts and food this and food that and farm to table, and it's just sort of out of control. And so I decided that to differentiate myself, I would just take the word chef and put it at the end of my name. It says, I come first now instead of the title.
It sounds almost European in the sense that, you speak a lot of languages. And I guess it's in Spanish, but perhaps also in French, how you place the adjective and how you place the noun
absolutely
matters.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I think it's sort of intriguing for me to see it now, Daniel Lanzilotta, chef. And so it's sort of another kind of a statement. But it's really interesting to see what's happened in the food world in terms of everybody wanting to jump on board. And it doesn't mean you need to know how to cook. It just means that you need to have the right connections and the right amount of money to get established and do something.
So chef can mean there's many layers of knowledge within people that call themselves chefs.
Right, it's a pretty vague title, so you don't really need to you don't need the experience of going to cooking school. And that doesn't mean that it reduces the quality or in any way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. It just means that what's happening in the food world at the moment is that there's just way too much competition. So if you've been doing this for 30 years or more, like I have, and then somebody comes on board and they just have the right amount of money, they can open up a place and establish themselves that way. They can come into a community, say like Westport, mm-hmm. and buy a building, open a restaurant because they have the cachet of a name. And those of us who have been there locally working from the ground up may not have accumulated that kind of money to buy a building, never mind just open a restaurant.
I had never thought about the idea of a chef paying their dues, establishing themselves, doing the difficult work that follows getting your culinary degree and building upon that. I guess a lot of us think about professions like doctors, lawyers, chefs, that people just, once you graduated, you've done all you need to do. You're there. Clearly that's not true.
Unfortunately, that's not the way it works. The food industry, especially from, say, Asian point of view or a classically trained European chef, mm-hmm. where you have to start around 12 years old and work through all the stages, and there are many different aspects of it. And there's the front of the house, the back of the house, there's wine, there's liquor, there's all kinds of aspects to being a chef. And there are many levels and different ways of finding yourself in the food industry. So the word chef just means chief in French. So
I was going to say because the old expression, there's no I in team. Well, anybody that's a chief or considers himself a chief in the sense of elevating their title or their persona, there is no I in chef.
Right. So my style of cooking was acquired through starting in California back in the mid-'80s, and I had gone to cooking school, went out to California.
Yeah.
Now, at the time in California is what's happening here now. So it's sort of kind of ironic to see what was happening back in the 1980s, the 80s, or early California cuisine like Nouvelle Cuisine,
yeah,
or Alice Waters and Jonathan Waxman, or Mark Peel, or Wolfgang Puck, and all these guys, or Jeremiah Tower, all these chefs that were coming out of California at that time. And now it's happening here, farm to table. Well, because California was the breadbasket of the United States in many respects, a lot of fresh foods, vegetables, and things like that, that was already happening back in the 70s and early 80s. So all of a sudden now there's this explosion. And I attribute that to a really bad economy, because people need to eat. And if you look at what's going on, especially in places like Westport and various other parts of Fairfield County, people are opening restaurants. Now, where people are getting the money to do that is beyond me. I can't figure it out. And how they expect to fill those restaurants, there's a glut right now of restaurants. So the strong ones, the better ones, the food, there's got to be something other than the food for people to go there. So maybe personality of the owner, location. There's all kinds of factors to consider.
The overall experience maybe is
right.
People want to have more than just food in a restaurant. They want to feel like they've become part of an experience. Now Kristen and I went to Viva Zapata's in Westport a couple of weeks ago, because she had been there many years ago and she wanted to go back, and we went and had relatively modest meal between the two of us. We only ate about three or four entrees between the two of us. We really had a great time. We really and a pitcher of sangria. Now you know that I don't drink.
Sangria makes it a lot more, different experience.
But for me, I will occasionally take a sip of sangria. Well, we went through a pitcher of sangria, and it was a great experience. But you say it takes a lot of money to crank up a restaurant, to get it going.
At a certain level, it does. You can open restaurants for a lot less, and you could take just the space and celebrate the food, and not deal with the interior as a design factor, and save a lot of money there. That would be my approach if I did a restaurant myself. It would be very minimum on the design of the restaurant, and high on the concentration of what the food quality was.
Focus on the food.
Or it would be. So. And in many cases, if you have backers, you might go all the way with the interior.
Yeah.
You might slack up on the chef and the food and hope for the best. So I would opt for the food and the long-term overall success of the restaurant or the food concept, and I would do hiring a very high-end, say, interior designer. I'd rather put my money into the food and the equipment that makes the food happen.
Well, that seems to me to make more sense than but I guess it depends upon your clientele. If your diners are people that are heavy drinkers, probably by the second or the third drink, they probably don't know what they're eating anyway.
That's funny you should say that.
So
that's an issue too, because people go into it for various reasons, and making a lot of money in a trendy restaurant is certainly a way of doing that, and alcohol and wine are money makers, no doubt. I mean, you can get a bottle of wine for $10 and sell it for $30.
Yeah,
or more. And there's an initiative right there to be in that business, because you could take one item and just instantaneously, just by keeping it in storage, triple your money.
Wow, that's a fair markup.
So
3 times. I'm sure the food isn't. Probably the foodstuffs that go into a restaurant. Probably
well, depending on the quality of food, and then labor costs are always a big issue.
Yeah,
but going back to my premise of what happened in the last 10 or 15 years in the food industry in the United States is pretty phenomenal. I mean, you can't get into a cooking school; they're packed. They're just overwhelmed with students, and graduation happens very quickly. It's not like going to college. You can get a certificate as a chef in 6 months, 3 months, 2 years.
Seems like a short amount of time.
It's a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
So we don't hone our chefs the way they would do, say, in Europe or in Asia. And there is a certain amount of dues you have to pay. It has a high turnover rate. People go into a restaurant for a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months. They move on, they quit, they go on to another establishment to gain that experience. So it's an exciting industry that you can start with basically nothing and work your way up to like a really successful lifestyle. And you see it all the time.
Okay, which leads us, of course, to the one of the premises we talked about for sitting down and talking, Occupy Wall Street. Have you been down there?
I have.
You seen?
I've been there. I went after everyone got kicked out.
Okay. Yeah.
I agree with the premise and the idea, but I can't understand the idea that we would, gang a whole group of people. Wall Street. That's a big giant picture of a group of people that not necessarily on Wall Street, but a concept that Wall Street represents corporate America. And the American people don't seem to want to take responsibility for the demise of this economy, perhaps this culture, this country. And I spend way too much time trying to keep myself afloat working. So I wouldn't, even though I agree with a lot of the issues at hand about what's happening down at Occupy Wall Street, wherever that may be now.
So it's all over the world.
I think that if you really want to work, you'll find something to do. I mean, this is a big country with a lot of things that need to be fixed.
Yep.
You may not get the price you want. You may not make the hourly wage you want, but you'll keep yourself busy. You'll keep your mind active, and something else will come out of it because you met somebody new.
And that's one of the things we've talked about on previous shows, about the idea of having some pride in what you do as a human being.
Right. So
making something, or even doing menial work.
Right. You do something because it's not what you're doing; it's how you do it. It becomes an attitude rather than this idea that this is going to be the end all to your life and your career, and it's not. Life was never meant to be an absolute. It's a dynamic, it's a river, it's changing constantly. So if you lost your job in corporate America and you're making $125,000, $200,000, whatever it may be, and you decide to wake up one day and go, I always enjoyed watching a guy cut meat in the butcher shop. I'm going to go try that. There's got to be somebody out there that's willing to train me. I'm going to go up. I'm going to get paid $10 an hour. Go do it. Because something else will come out of it. And something else will come out of that. And so you build up all different experiences, and you have a whole other way of seeing the world. It wasn't that cubicle that you complained about, and then you got fired, and then you sit home for a year or 2 years. And I hear this story. I literally hear this story all the time.
People complain about whatever they're doing if they want to complain.
And I say, yes, I understand the premise of Occupy Wall Street, but it's not just about corporate America. We chose to put ourselves out of business. We chose to do away with manufacturing. We chose to offshore everything. We chose it because of price. And we have built an economy, it's a non-economy. It's irreversible. It's an upside-down pyramid. And it crushed. It fell in on itself. It's not a way to build a structure. And I blame Apple computers. I blame Steve Jobs. I met Steve Jobs when I was in college. I had 2 minutes to spend with him. And he was a giant figure in my life at that time. And now he essentially is 2 years older than me. He built a multi-billion-dollar industry and all its infrastructure based around his idea of design. That's why you can't change a battery in an iPhone, because it disturbed the look and it controls the phone. So you can't get to your battery, you have to get a new phone. But where's the phone made? It's made in China. Now, I just find that absurd. And folks down at Occupy Wall Street, and I'm just as guilty. I have an iPhone. are utilizing a thing that was designed in America but manufactured in China. There's a lot of products like that. Go to Costco. Almost all of their products are from China.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so we hoard this stuff. We load our cars up, which are not American cars, with stuff made offshore, and then we complain that there are no jobs. Then we complain about the guy who comes over the wall fence from Mexico back into Mexico, which is America now, and say, we don't want you here, but we want you to work in the field and pick our vegetables for us, but we don't want you here to be here and to have a life here. Meanwhile, when they are sent back to Mexico, other countries that they come in illegally, then we are shocked by the idea that we can't get our fruits and vegetables. Because no one in America is going to do that. Not even prisoners who tried to do it wanted to do it. So what are we talking about here?
So maybe what you're kind of alluding to is that maybe folks should reinvent America, reinvent our country by going into the fields, picking vegetables, doing some difficult work.
There's never going to be a revolution in America like what's happening in the Middle East or in Asia or parts of Europe or former Soviet bloc. Because we become numb and comfortable. We prefer to be numb and comfortable than to actually take the bull by the horns. And that's why I like Occupy Wall Street, but it's not at the point where it's been radicalized. And there are some folks that say it shouldn't be radicalized. It should be a peaceful demonstration.
Right.
And I agree with that to an extent. But the powers that be, they're taking notice, and then they're getting the message. I mean, I think it was some of the banks wanted to increase fees or something like that, and then Occupy Wall Street, through the use of the internet and what have you, got the message very clearly that increasing fees wasn't a good idea, and they put a stop to it. Now, you could take that a step further, because when people are going down to Occupy Wall Street and saying, what is this movement about? What does it stand for? Now, I don't know if it was a mass media idea to not inform the rest of the people that they did have an agenda and they do have a focus and they do have a path to take. I'm not seeing that. But when you have that much power, so much human power, with that much connectivity,
and that many people
all over the world, you just say, well, today we're going to boycott this corporation. We're going to boycott this company because they're poisoning the environment. So it's like, I will not give any money to anything that says they're looking for a cure for cancer, because there is no cure for cancer, in my opinion. Because you're not dealing with the cause of the cancer. Okay, yes, I'm not a scientist.
The poisons that we ingest into our body.
Perhaps some of it is inherited. Maybe we do have these genes in our body and certain things trigger it. But let's look at the triggers. You know, and let's clean up the environment. What corporation is poisoning the water? What corporation is poisoning the food system? What corporation, who are these folks? And then zero in on them and just take them down by boycott.
One by one.
One by one. And with that incredible power that Occupy Wall Street has proven to have, I don't see it happening.
Well, there are quite a few messages. There are quite a few things that and I was there for opening day down in Zuccotti Park, September 17th. I call it opening day because I'm a baseball fan. And then back on October 5th for the labor rally, and spent the entire day, both days there. And there are a lot of very good messages coming out of there, and I think in our need, as a culture, and our need for hearing dumbed down, simplified messages, when we hear 10 or 15 or 20 or 100 different focuses for Occupy Wall Street, we say, whoa, wait a second. Don't give me all these things. Give me a slogan. Can I have a slogan, please? Just give me a slogan. 21 words or less. What Occupy Wall Street is.
So you can tweet it.
So we can tweet it. Yeah, exactly. there are many messages. There are many focuses. There's, of course, Move Your Money, where we're encouraging people to take their money out of large banks.
People are overwhelmed prior to Occupy Wall Street, and it just seems that the culture is set up in a way to keep people distracted, drugged, drunk, uneducated, and in positions of disenfranchisement, I guess, if that's a word.
Yeah.
And
point well taken at any rate, even if it isn't a word.
Well, it's a word now. To be be disenfranchised, not to have the power of choice to make things happen for oneself.
Yeah.
And I was living in Europe for a while, and I came back to this country, and I feel that way sometimes. And I have a great education, I have a lot of skills, but I'm living in a time in this country where if you don't have an in from something established, you're going to have a hard time getting going here. And I remember a time, if you had a few $1,000s in your pocket, you invented something and you went into business and you built it and you did it. It was like in the 60s and 70s.
Soup to nuts, if I will use.
But now everybody wants to be in everybody else's pocket, and you need a permit, a license. You need all kinds of paperwork and insurance and bankers and lawyers. That the idea of being an entrepreneur at some level has almost been wiped out in this culture. But now there's a reawakening, and I think that epicenter is Brooklyn. I mean, there's a lot of entrepreneurial stuff going on in Brooklyn. You have Etsy, and you have artists, and you have craftspeople. You have people making beer and shoes, and just so everything is starting to blossom in Brooklyn. And I hope that reemerges and comes out of Brooklyn and as a hub with some spokes, and lets people really start to reinvent themselves, because we're not going to get the economy back. From the trickle-down idea. It's not happening.
No, it never has. Reagan gave us that thought of trickle-down, and there's no trickle-down, because everything gets clogged on the way down and sticks with a... Actually, in fact, Reagan's economy was a trickle-up economy and it's continuing to this day, where middle-class people, their money is taken, their resources are taken, their initiatives are taken, and sucked upward by the 1%, if you will.
Right. Well, we saw some great things during the dot-com days back in, I guess it was the 80s, and that's sort of coming back and things like that. And I think we have to get back to things that we could touch, feel, taste, cut in half, three-dimensional material objects, and get the car back industry back on its feet.
Take me back to Brooklyn, because you started talking about Brooklyn. Is Brooklyn becoming more of a self-sustainable
absolutely.
City, or a self-sustainable nation, if you will?
I think Brooklyn is the shining example of what we think America is. It's the immigrant. It's the guy who has an idea and goes for it and does it from scratch, gets a storefront, builds it himself or herself, and starts something with nothing or with very little, and just goes for it. I mean, there are food trucks, there are all kinds of concessions. There's on DeKalb Avenue, there's like a container. They took containers, trucking containers, and made a little entrepreneurial city of designers and food people, and there are containers with whole cafes inside them, built into them. It's really interesting to see how the ingenuity to get this thing going. So young people and people who want to be independent. We've had in this country the culture of the pioneer, trailblazing your life. And then all of a sudden we fell into the gap, literally fell into the gap of cookie cutter clothes, cookie cutter food, and people got really comfortable. They got inundated with toxic waste for food and water, and it just seemed to be acceptable. It's okay because they say it's okay. This product's fine, and it's okay because government says it's okay. Without question, then all of a sudden, people are getting sick. And then all of a sudden there's a group of people saying, well, wait a minute, that's not right. This is how it used to be done. And we've had a period in this country of just absolute ignorance and letting other people dictate who we are as individuals.
And what
now that Occupy Wall Street is upon us, people are starting to wake up. That you can...
Folks, now wait a second now. Folks, I don't care if American Idol's coming on in 2 minutes. Stay with us. Thank you. Continue.
And so... With that idea, the idea of being your own person, and Well, there are certain individuals and entities in this culture, in this country, that don't want you to be that way.
Who is this? Who are these? Who are they? Who are these? These people that
folks
want to control us.
They're big corporations.
And how do we let them get away with it?
Well, they've done a really good job by taking reign of the food chain, of bottling water.
Oh yeah,
and price fixing petroleum-based products, and taking us hostage with fossil fuels. I mean, I watched the price of gasoline go up and down according to their whim. Yeah. They hold barges of oil out on the ocean till they decide, well, that's the price we're going to get. It goes in. I can sometimes go, well, why is the price of gasoline in Greenwich, Westport, various towns like that, 20 or 30 cents more, and I go inland where it's harder to get a tanker truck in. And
absolutely.
And I'm like, there's something not right about that. That's manipulating the price because they know those folks around those areas don't care that much if they're paying some more money. But the guy who's driving from Bridgeport to work in Westport cares a lot.
Yeah,
cares a lot.
That means a couple of dinners for his family a month,
right? So,
based on the price of gas for a month.
I don't understand the economics behind it, because if I'm driving somewhere else in an out-of-way place, I'm like, oh, the gas is a lot cheaper here. But how did they get it here? It's so much easier to get it to Fairfield County.
Well, these guys that they call commodities traders,
right?
Whoever came up with the idea of people sitting around and waving their arms and waving tags and somehow calling this work?
It's called supply and demand.
This is work?
That's how they set the price for certain products.
Screaming and yelling like a bunch of mad lunatics, and they're making a lot of money for doing that. This is work.
Yeah, you can get a job like that in a kitchen and get paid very little.
On that note, talking about commodities traders, bless all of you, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to do a second show. This is Progressive Soup. I'm David Stevenson. Dan Lanzillota, chef.
Thank you.
Or is that Dan Lanzillota, no comma? Chef.
Comma.
Comma, good. Let's stick with the comma then. Good night. We'll be back for the miracle of modern television well, if this is on Wednesday evening, 9:30, you'll see us again tomorrow, Thursday at noon 30. Good night. Okay.